Final Fantasy as a franchise has had an incredible run for multiple generations at this point. Despite only 16 mainline entries, we've received over 100 Final Fantasy games in its nearly 40-year history. From all the way back on the NES up until now on the PS5, it remains one of, if not the main pillar of Square Enix. Let's be honest, it is an absolute cash cow for them. Now, does that include some absolute embarrassments we all pretend don't exist? Yeah, of course it does. But we're staying positive today, so let's continue to pretend those never happened, and Dissidia is still a highly regarded IP. It's safe to say there is no such thing as the definitive best entry in the series. After all, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, so even if you don't agree, there really is someone out there who thinks Final Fantasy 13 is better than 9. That someone might be me, but that's for another video. Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 10, Final Fantasy... okay, I can just skip the Final Fantasy part at this point. All of these have been considered generational entries, genre-defining even. But outside of the common popular entries, there has always been one spin-off that stood out above the rest. Final Fantasy Tactics, a non-mainline entry that came out the same year as Final Fantasy VII, arguably the most popular game in the franchise, and despite selling less than 3 million copies since release, that didn't stop it from growing one of the strongest and most dedicated fan bases of all time. People would praise Tactics to not only be on par, but even be better than most mainline entries, with many claiming it has the best story in the franchise. Yes, the same franchise that gave us Final Fantasy X. But I have to wonder, is it actually that good, or is it just another victim of nostalgia? So as someone who never got to play the original, I always wondered just how accurate all of these claims can be. Sometimes the longer we've had since an experience, the better we remember it, not just in gaming, but life in general. It's natural that we often overlook moments that just weren't perfect. Moments of frustration and irritation get lost and overpowered by the memories we want to remember. The good times when things were simple and we spent countless hours on things we would need months of time for nowadays. I really am getting old. So now that Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice Chronicles is finally upon us, I could find out the truth myself by experiencing what many consider a masterpiece for the very first time. I should point out, whilst this isn't a deep dive of the game, some minor spoilers will be mentioned and late game footage will be shown. I will leave a spoiler tag for one small section towards the end of the video, but if you want to avoid any spoilers altogether, then I would recommend coming back once you've played at least the first 2 acts. And if you guys do enjoy the video, then a like would be really appreciated, as this is the start of a new direction for me with this channel, so any support helps even more now than ever before. Final Fantasy Tactics is set in the world of Ivalice and puts you in the shoes of Ramza, a young noble from the House Beowulf. If you have never played this game before, but for some reason the world sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same world as Final Fantasy XII. The most overlooked Final Fantasy entry, but again, that's for another video. No, seriously, the next video is Final Fantasy XII, so you might want to check it out as well. And as much as he is the protagonist, ticking all the boxes you would expect of being just, having strong morals, that handsome haircut, having a female character he needs to protect, and standing up against the brutality of the world, it doesn't all follow the same formula you might expect from a Final Fantasy, or most JRPGs for that matter. Because whilst he does take on battles very few people could, the story of Tactics is far less about Ramza, but instead the world and events you experience through his eyes. Ramza only wants to do what he believes is right, and those ideas are nearly always the same as the player, if you're not a psychopath that is. However, attempting to do all that in a medieval world that's so politically and religiously influenced might not be as simple as looking cool and defeating the ultimate evil. A single soldier does not have anywhere near the power to match the influence of the church or a king. It's not about the praise and status for Ramza, but instead seeing how the leaders of the world would react to these actions. What might seem like a grand battle to you, most of the common folk will never learn about. And everyone in this story makes sure you are aware of this. They want you to know that many of your actions will not be recognized, and no matter how grand they might be at the time, they will end up getting lost in history. And this is one of the game's greatest selling points. Its harsh realism. Even someone like Ramza, who is a noble, can't do all that much. Things such as the Chosen One aren't exactly the reality of life. We are forced to adapt to decisions someone else made without the average civilian in consideration. People are sent off to war, given near impossible tasks they don't want to do, and not just looked down upon, but treated below a human level. Being born into the wrong family means being nothing more than a throwaway tool for those above you. And that is the core of what Tactics wants you to understand. Life is not fair, and a single man can't even begin to change that. One of the greatest moments from the entire game comes in Act 1 for a character named Argath, and it isn't so much a single moment, but the build-up of events. This is very early on, so at this point you're still getting accustomed to the world and characters. Yeah, sure, there are some tensions and a history of a 50-year war, but you don't think much of it because you're just excited for your grand adventure as Ramza. And that's where Argath gets introduced. At first, he seems like a future ally who respects the Beowulf name, but as time goes on with each conversation, we see a glimpse of a character that makes us uncomfortable. Through him, we get a build-up of realization that many nobles do not view lives equally, dehumanizing civilians in any way they see fit, almost to say they are lucky to even be breathing the same air. All of this because of birth. And we see Ramza both taken back but also unsure how to deal with someone like this, meanwhile having the player realize this is only one person in a world that's been like this far too long to be changed for a conversation. I hated Argath for what he represented, but he is the prime example of why Tactics is so beloved as a story. A story that shows cruelty of certain people without always trying to redeem them or give them a backstory and reasoning for their actions. And even as the story goes on to become this epic tale of trying to stop scheming powerhouses and an ancient evil from awakening, it never forgets or ignores the roots of Act 1. The setup of this cold, harsh world is as prominent in the opening hours as it is in the final minutes. Some people are just evil. Nothing more, nothing less. As great as the setup of the world and story is, we have to treat this version of the game with a bit more modern standard. After all, it's a brand new game technically built from the ground up in the year 2025. And since its original release, there have been a number of tactical games in a similar style released to critical acclaim. Fire Emblem still dominates, always improving its gameplay even when the characters have taken a huge step back visually, but even Square Enix themselves have put out titles like Triangle Strategy to a very positive reception. Fortunately, with the quality of life improvements that have been implemented into this version of the game, it's an extremely smooth experience that has an older charm to it without feeling old, allowing it to stand with, if not above, modern tactical RPGs. There is only so much you can do with this visual style of gameplay, but the designs have been smoothed out, the UI fits perfectly along the borders of the screen, and the 3D backgrounds have a great amount of life to them through vibrant colors and smooth framework. But the most crucial part of this version has to be the addition of voice acting. The story and dialogue of Final Fantasy Tactics is written in what seems to be a mix of Old English and Shakespearean. It's hard to define it as purely one of them, but regardless, it isn't exactly modern English for the most part. And I cannot stress enough how much a detail like that would go over most people's head if not for the incredibly high quality voice acting that the Ivalice Chronicles come with. Naturally, we've come to expect voice acting in all modern games unless you're a Pokemon fan. In that case, I just feel bad for you. But the style of writing and story delivery in Tactics can be uncommon to many modern gamers. Now I'll let you decide if that says more about the average modern gamer than anything else, but I digress. The voice acting here has to be some of the best I have experienced from a Square Enix title. I feel confident enough to say that I would put this in the same realm as Final Fantasy 16, but this time proving you don't need the most modern graphics to sell an emotion. The realness and raspiness of a voice line delivery is far more crucial to immersing the player. These pixelated characters had more soul to them than most modern RPGs. But of course, without the right voice acting cast, none of this would be possible. Agrius, Argath, Daisadag, Ramza, Wiegraf, these are just some examples of characters that deliver every line to near perfection. Ramza's voice tone changes drastically between the first hours and the final moments. There's a sense of defeat, but not in him as a person, but his old beliefs. He no longer has a hopeful voice that believes the world can change easily, but instead he becomes what I can only describe as tired. And the beauty of it is that at no point does he have to tell us how he feels. We can hear it in his outlook and tone of voice when addressing different scenarios. My only hope is that the voice actors get the recognition they deserve, because this has to be some of the best voice acting I've heard in RPGs this entire year. As I mentioned before, I have never played the original, so I can't exactly compare this version to the one people played before I was even born. Despite that, I am extremely confident in one thing. If there is only one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. Out of every Final Fantasy I have ever played, this might just be the most addicting gameplay of them all. As much praise as the story gets, none of it would matter if the gameplay to reach those highs wouldn't be good enough to keep the player hooked. Not to be that guy, but look at my boy Chain of Memories, one of the best story entries in the entire Kingdom Hearts series, but you have half the players watching old cutscenes on YouTube because of how bad the gameplay is. Do I agree? No, I love card games. I actually think Chain of Memories is really fun. But that is not the point. It's almost shocking how gameplay that's technically so extremely simple could have me addicted to this concept of just a couple more. And this is because Tactics isn't so much about an in-the-moment gameplay, but about planning ahead and creating the best units available for the next main battle. All of this thanks to its iconic job system. Each class has its own unique abilities that are only available for unlocking them using job points. And the only way to earn these points is by performing actions in combat whilst using that class. For example, a Dark Mage doesn't come equipped with any basic spells, he's just another dude with a stick. Instead, spells like Thunder or Fire have to be unlocked by spending job points they gained in battles. This also means you could technically skip all basic skills and save up for the most powerful ones straight away. The most advanced classes come with more unique abilities, but the way to get those classes will often require leveling up previous ones to a certain extent. If that wasn't enough, then you add the fact each character can mix abilities of separate classes through the following methods: action, reaction, support, and movement. This creates an almost never-ending spiral of chasing the image of an ultimate unit, mixing abilities from all across the job system as you see fit. A major fun factor of Tactics is figuring out what you personally enjoy the most, which classes are most fun to you and which ones were a waste of time trying to unlock. Act 4 is where most players will spend the longest trying to finalize the best lineup for the end game with the experiences they gained up until this point, as well as completing certain side content that will please most Final Fantasy fans. But it's Act 1 that can be most challenging, when all of this is unfamiliar to the player and it's your job to figure out the best next step. In an era where you will find countless videos telling you what the best class setup for each battle is or how to be overpowered in Act 1, I strongly believe figuring out what works and what doesn't firsthand is more crucial to the fun factor than simply going through the levels with ease by copying another person online. Regardless if you figure it out on your own or if you watch the video, as expected, you can become absolutely broken by the late game with different skills. But the same logic also applies to enemy units, and that's something Tactics nails perfectly. Enemies will be using skills that for the most part, you can unlock yourself. There's little point to getting irritated by an enemy unit when in fact most of the time, they just have a better setup and strategy than you do. Ivalice Chronicles is a fair game. Fair because whatever you can do, so can your enemies. Except that one fight, you know, the one that literally isn't fair, I don't know why it's in this game, is the only fight that made me genuinely annoyed with this whole system. You know which one I'm talking about, you can probably see it on the screen right now, it's absolute bullshit. However, all of that does not mean the gameplay is flawless, because there's definitely some aspects that could be improved, starting with the camera. The camera angles during the combat have a tendency to feel a little out of control. The constant spinning is something that takes a while to get used to, but eventually it becomes a norm. That doesn't mean it's okay, I'm just letting you know you kinda get used to it. What's not so easy to get used to is not being able to see the field or your enemy properly because none of the 4 angles available provide a good view. After over 40 hours, this was easily my biggest issue with the game. Not being able to see the enemy attacking me because there's a massive mountain in the way is something I shouldn't have to worry about. This could have easily been fixed by letting the player rotate the camera freely or at least have 6 to 8 angles rather than just 4. It's a very small thing, but in a game where you're spending so much time in combat, this shouldn't be an issue. And whilst it wasn't enough to take me out of the immersion, I can't deny it was enough to add to the irritation of losing the same battle for the 4th time in a row. The second main issue is the amount of new units in Act 4. Overall, Act 4 is a longer arc, and that is okay, but certain characters unlock only a few missions before the final moments, and whilst this makes a lot of sense in the story, some are extremely overpowered compared to the rest which are lacking any skills you would want them equipped with, meaning that what could have been the final 2 hours of the game can easily become the final 8 because you need to level up multiple jobs for separate endgame characters just to equip them with specific skills. I am aware, however, this might just be a me problem, so feel free to disagree. And lastly, this is minimal, but it would have been nice to have the ability to skip dialogue for scenes you've already seen. This isn't even me being picky, I just felt horrible seeing the same person get shot to death 10 times in a row because I couldn't figure out how to defeat someone with auto potion. And before wrapping things up, I just want to get something off my chest. I just want to know if anyone else happens to share my opinion. I feel like this might be my most unpopular opinion about this game, but I just have to express myself. I do not like Deletia. I was so irritated with this man that the final cutscene had me shouting out of joy that he finally got what he deserved, only for that joy to then leave my body 10 seconds later. It's not to say I don't think he was well written, because his story presence was great, making the player uneasy with his thinking process and trying to figure out what he could be plotting. But his rise to power felt almost too perfect and easy. He was somehow always 2 steps ahead, and maybe I just wish the game dived deeper into moments of vulnerability rather than becoming this perfect manipulator almost out of nowhere. The lead here slowly becoming the very thing he hated, a user of pawns that threw and took away lives for his own greedy goals. It was an arc that would have benefited far more from more realness, moments of doubt, and vulnerability. But instead, his descent into what he becomes seems to happen overnight. The exact same system that got his sister killed was the one he used for his own rise to power, and as far as we see, he never did anything to ensure this cycle doesn't keep repeating for future generations. I wanted to like this character, but it's a story that could have done with a few more chapters diving deeper into how he got here for me to understand him rather than just accept who he is because that's it. So where does all of that leave Final Fantasy Tactics? As it's now available on all modern consoles with many touch-ups and quality of life improvements, it's no longer the niche entry of the past. And now with it finally getting a second chance at life, people can continue to praise it for future generations as they have up until now. However, this also means it's available for modern criticism. So allow me to say this. Final Fantasy Tactics unfortunately suffers just a bit from being overhyped, but in no way does that take away from it being an incredible entry in a historic franchise. It is an extremely engaging and time-sinking experience, the type where you tell yourself just one more only for multiple hours to go by. The story can feel a little overwhelming at first, being very name focused, but it develops into one of the most captivating political stories in JRPG history. And despite how much complexity this story has to fit in, it still manages to find time, for the most part, to explore side stories and moments that in the grand scheme of things are nothing but a forgotten interaction. There are moments that feel slightly unbalanced. One minute you're having to redo the same battle 5 times, then you end up winning the next 5 on your first attempt. And Act 4 suffers the most from this by simply introducing a single character. And if you're someone that doesn't enjoy the idea of grinding hours to unlock a single skill for one boss, then this might be one of those classic masterpieces you might want to stay away from. But that is exactly why, with Act 1 being arguably the toughest part of the experience, it will even make or break the game for all first time players. And as great as this story is, it doesn't stand out as much as it might have in the past. There have been numerous incredible stories in gaming with an even bigger impact, as well as many other incredible tactical RPGs since its original release 28 years ago. But that doesn't take away from this standing proud as one of those classic games that fans of the genre, and definitely fans of Final Fantasy, should at least attempt. Thank you for watching. If you've played the Ivalice Chronicles, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. And if you haven't, then I hope this video helped you in deciding if it's something for you. As mentioned before, the channel is taking a slightly different direction heading into the next year, so you can expect more videos of this type going forward. Until then, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.